Check. What's up, Mr. B? Do you want to take a guess? Let's hope this controller works today. Hey, what's up, Menzi? Nice. How's life in Vietnam? We're gonna see if this controller does the job. Same controller, just seems to be working last night. As soon as you come off the stream, it works. You come on stream, it stops working. Right, there we are. Oh. Alright, so I'm trying to figure out how to get a new weapon set. Kind of getting sick of these. And fighting the boy Mesmo is quite difficult. Ooh. Yikes. I think this is way too early for my normal time of viewers. The algorithm doesn't know who to send this stuff to. When I used to do like 5, 6 a.m. streams, catching the Americans a bit late. There we go. I'm sure there's more to see in this area before we bounce. Fujifilm, bro. What's up, Salah? Alright, you went there. And this is quite a good space for mining points as well. Excellent space for mining points. It's like the lowest effort area ever. Yeah, the main game completed a few times. Oh, I forgot about him. This is my first time playing the DLC though, so I'm not quite sure what to do yet. I have found the boss though. Progression of what? Come on. There we go. Easy money. Which tree sentinel? Some are tougher than others. Depends. Nah, Swam. I don't find that to be the case. I think if your god requires belief in order to interact with it, then it's functionally non-existent. So I don't find belief to be suitable at all. It's religiosity speaking. It sounds. I say this with all due respect. Sounds like a cope. You would need to have to just believe if the thing itself didn't exist, innit? Whereas if the thing actually existed, belief wouldn't really be necessary. What's up, Cook? Oh, the first one? Nah, just leave that alone, bro. Unless you're like super skilled, you're not going to beat that on your first playthrough. You just need to progress, level up your character, and then come back to it later. The first tree sentinel was pretty weak compared to the ones you meet later. What about it? What about it, Menzu? It's just a calendar. And it's not called that anymore anyways. It's called Common Era. So what technically it always would have been called. Those orbs, I'm not sure how to beat them though. Let's check this end of the beach first. Nah, it's definitely not. There's a lot of oh look, there's a site of grace. There is a lot of running though, which is kind of good. It's good that map is so big. $, that's a weird view. Very weird view indeed. So if you're just tuning in, my name is Set. I'm a YouTuber who makes long form content designed to make you think. The topic of the stream is the same it usually is. Yes, Cybernetic, it is live. It is humans invented God. When I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. Meaning I can show you the how, I can show you the why. And in some instances I can show you the when and the where. It also has predictive power because it accounts for all type of God beliefs and God concepts that exist in our world and that we might come across in the future. Without having to actually posit that, you know, these supernatural entities truly exist on their own. But yeah, if you want to know my personal position on the matter is this. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It's likely it requires somebody to devise a concept of God and impart it to you for you to interact with, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. Oh, there goes the controller. It's doing what it wants again. Not necessarily drifty. In some things, right? I don't hold myself to one school of thought in philosophy. Being that I'm not a philosopher, I'm just like a noob, barely through an introductory book. I've got no reason to hold to one school of thought. Well, thing is, Salah, that's part of why I'm saying humans invented God. There isn't one singular God concept. There are some that are more configured or more conceptualized than others, but there isn't one universal idea of God in the first place. The way I'm using the word God is as a category definer for supernatural entities or deities. So the configuration of those supernatural entities or deities can vary, like culture to culture, region to region, time to time, as we'll get into a bit later in the stream. I'll pull up some gods from different regions of the world, how they're configured, why they're likely configured that way. Ooh, there's water there. Let me get over there then. Oh, what are you? Ugh. Yeah, religion is like a secondary topic, bro. Religion really has little to do with God when you actually start to study it. Religion is about culture and humans. as far as God concepts go, they predate religions by like tens of thousands of years. So religion's just a human thing, really. God's also a human thing, but yeah, religion itself is more about humans than it is about God. If you actually pay attention. Well, I'll put it to you like this, right? I'm not quite sure what you mean by exist, but I grant that there are immaterial things, e.g., abstract concepts, formal processes, you know. But like I said, I've got no reason to hold to one school of thought. Again, there could be so much I don't know. I mean, I don't know if we'll ever arrive at what you're describing as a post-God reality. I don't know if that's a possibility, considering the way gods are purely conceptual in the first place. It's kind of like, although the idea of a post-religious society would be ideal, it'd be almost impractical to actually bring about, because what would happen is you drive the more extreme elements of religion underground, and they become even more extreme and more radical. So that's what would happen with God concepts as well. It would be nice, but I can't think of a practical way to bring it about. Put it that way. You can't really. It's very difficult to convince people out of their beliefs. It's not impossible, because obviously I'm living proof of that, but it's very difficult. I wonder how we get across there. Might be a tunnel of some kind. Yeah, I would say they're universal concepts as long as the language and the process is understood. I often say this, right? So God would be considered an abstract concept, like maths and logic would be considered an abstract concept, but God is a different category of abstract concepts to maths and logic. There is no universal understanding of God, but whatever the principles and the language of mathematics is understood, it applies universally. You'll get the same answers. Okay? Whereas God isn't. Region to region, time to time, culture to culture, person to person, God is not universal. God would be in a separate category, or like a different category of abstract concepts, and it'd be likely considered a fictional character. Sorry, I was going to do something, but the controller started working again all of a sudden. Well, yeah, humanoid polytheism is well, the correct term would be henotheism. Henotheism is the foundation of the Abrahamic faiths, because they're really based on the God of Abraham. And, you know, the tribe or the culture that Abraham comes from would be the Israelites or the Hebrews, and they were henotheistic. In order to get to, you know, God the Father, they had to take elements from El Elyon, Elohim, from the Canaanite gods, and mix it with Yahweh in order to get the God that, you know, the Abrahamic subscribed to in the first place. So it's true. But again, your average Christian, they're probably not even aware of that. Right? That's another reason why I say try to keep religion just out of the conversation if you can. Because in order to accept that Jesus exists as anything more than a man, and that the God of the Bible is true, then you have to accept the Canaanite gods, the Mesopotamian gods, what they call themselves, the Sumerian gods. Like, you need to accept all of the things that entail the genealogy of the God of the Bible in order for it to actually exist in some capacity. But most modern Christians would not go for that, again, because they're probably not actually well versed on their doctrine. Oh, I see what happened there. I put on unlisted. No wonder no one's seeing the video. So you're like, oh, there's no one in the chat. Yeah, it's unlisted. How do I fix that? $50 minutes. That's funny. What's up, lady? Not yet, Screws. Like, there are clips on the TikTok. You can watch well, you can watch some of the restreams on the Culture Crack YouTube channel. It's in a live stream playback playlist. Oh, he's dead. Flip it now. So how we invented the first types of gods is using what's called hyperactive agency detection device. It's based on observation, of course, but it's like I'll bring up the explainer on the screen so you can read it for yourself. Again, if you're over on the vertical YouTube, you need to come to the main YouTube, which is Culture Crack, or the main TikTok, which is Set West 10. So the first type of god creations that humans would have produced would have been based on observation, and these observations would have been based around elemental things, which is earth, wind, water, fire, and celestial things, which is like stars, the sun, the moon, etc. What hyperactive agency detection device is, I'll read it for you. It's a cognitive theory suggesting that humans have an evolved, built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, people, spirits and gods. It's done to enhance survival, even when none exist, acting like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. It was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. Had posits that a false positive, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphizing just means giving something human features. Right? Seeing purpose in randomness and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. Now, an example of this, what it might have looked like in practice, because we still make use of this built-in like cognitive device till this day. You'll see people use it all the time. You know? An example of this, what this might have looked like to our ancestors, is they go out into nature and they see what we know to be as a storm, a thunderstorm. Lightning strikes. An observer of the lightning says, I have a mind. I don't understand such an awe-striking event. Right? Therefore, there must be a mind, higher than mine, who's responsible for the lightning, or the lightning itself is acting on its own agency, it's acting on its own accord. And over time, they build story, L-O-R-E, around it, right? And it becomes legend, and then they deify it into its own entity. So where we get, gods of the sky, and storms, and thunders, and volcanoes, and the sea, lots of sea gods from the same cognitive theory, okay? Same thing with sun gods. But yeah, I'm a bit like croaky and a bit tired today. But there's three major phases to god creation. So when I say humans invented God, right, it's called an explanatory claim. I can show you the how and I can show you the why. This cognitive theory plays a big part in the how and the why. Phase 1, assigning agency to things they don't understand, like I just explained. Phase 2 is abstraction, right? So the ability to conceptualize things comes to humans, as our minds develop, as our brains develop. And now we're not building God concepts based on an observation, like with agency. We're thinking up abstract things like love, war, and knowledge, and then we're deifying these entities. Why is it done? It's to give certainty where there's uncertainty, right? It's like a god of the gaps type of situation, right? Similar to the agency, but agency is more primitive, more observational. Phase 3 is for societal cohesion. As we get to phase 3 god creation, we mix agency with abstraction, but now we start to anthropomorphize and give them what's called hierarchical natures, like how we have them, right? So we explain ourselves through the gods. That's where you see pantheons start to pop up across the world. Zeus, Greece; Odin, Scandinavia; Ra, Egypt; Enlil, or Inanna, Sumeria; Shiva, India; right? Yu Huang, Jade Emperor, East Asia. Right? So phase 1 was assigning agency to things. Phase 2 is abstraction for psychological needs, and phase 3 is for societal cohesion, to mobilize people under ideology and start to organize society, right, into proto-religions, temples, etc. All right, that's it. God creation tracks almost one-to-one with human evolution. God concepts need to evolve too. It's how we get to the God of the Bible. It's based on that same trajectory of God creation. So, yeah. So let's. I'll do more explainers in a bit. Let's play a little bit more game. What's up, Luke? What's up, Tom? This controller is so cooked. I'm really starting to think it's a signal issue. Something's jamming us. Ain't got enough, any long enough wires to test it though. Yeah, it's not a story, bro. It's literally the trajectory of human history. It's supportable through archaeology, that means artifacts we find in the ground, anthropology, study of human nature and history, cognitive science, study of minds, psychoanalysis, the study of minds, or how we do what we do. Well, yeah. One is the study of brain, the other is the study of mind. So it's not a story, it's not a baseless claim, it's very supportable. And like I said, I feel it has explanatory success, being that it hits all of these key frontiers, plus it has predictive power. Frontiers. You know what I mean? I think I came that way. So, I'm saying humans invented God. It's an explanatory claim. I feel it has explanatory success considering we know the how, the why, and in some instances the where and the when. If you had to explain this very simply to a child to understand, it's like this. Historically, there's never been any universal concept of God. That means every culture has had their own idea of what a God is. Every individual interacts with that concept differently. No one in human history has ever gone out onto their native land and discovered the God of another person's land. That's just not how it happens. People produce gods themselves for their own cultural or personal needs. Simply put, in order for you to get to the God you likely believe in today, humans have to go through the evolutionary trajectory of developing God concepts across the world, mixing and matching ideas together to get what you probably believe in today. But so far as there being evidence for what you believe in today, as far as I'm aware, there's never been evidence of a God existing as an independent entity or agent capable of having any effect, any meaningful effect on our physical reality. All things that point to the ideas of God come directly from humans. Man, this controller's starting to annoy me. Like, it just stops on its own. Like, what is that about? Excuse me. No NPC though. I don't know what you're talking about, Melissa. It doesn't make sense to me. What? So, we've got a bunch of people watching from the internet browsers, which is weird as hell, but shit, if you want to be here, you may as well. Just be here with your full chest. No one's going to judge you. Yeah, I'm not sure what the relevance of this is, Drifty. At the table. So how's that working then? Something weird about that. Morals come from humans, bro. If there were no humans, there'd be no morals. Explain giraffes. I think that would be on you to do that one, to be honest. Explain all the variations of animals. What would be the point? Yeah, I'm aware of that. So when I say humans invented God, it's what's called an explanatory claim. I think it has explanatory success, being that we know the how and the why, and in some instances the when and the where. Societal cohesion is one of those whys. So it's part of that trajectory of God creation. You could even argue it's necessary, but there's no reason that we shouldn't evolve past that. Yeah, you're probably right about that, Kamini. Sorry, who disproves evolution? I don't think you're serious, bro. The fact that you're here talking to me is proof of evolution. Oh, my controller, man. Looks like we're going to have to play something else. Just does what it wants, son. What a drag. I'm serious as well. The fact that you're here talking to me is proof of evolution. What makes you think evolution isn't real? Are you one of those people that think something can come from nothing? I'm gonna go on the limit, if that's how you put it, or whim, and say it's likely you're someone who thinks something can come from nothing. That's why you're saying that. So, what you're looking at on the screen, if I can get it into size. What have I done to you? Just squashed it. Can't even get up on the screen now. Alright. What you're looking at on the screen is some artifacts. Not artifacts, sorry. Some fossils of our past relatives, if you want. Okay. So what's your reason for thinking what's on the screen isn't real? Because me, I've been to the museums, I've seen them in person. So I've got no reason to think they're not real. course you can't prove the existence of God because they don't exist, or at least not outside of the concepts. As I said, I've been to the museums and seen them, right? So if you, I don't know where you are in the world, but you should go to London, visit the Natural History Museum and look at the skulls and the bodies for yourself. In fact, on my TikTok channel, there's a video of me going there and walking through the exhibition and showing you on the camera. So I've seen them in person. I've got no reason to think they don't exist. Whereas you may have just been getting your information from the internet. Why are we so delayed? Oh, it's not that we're delayed. No, what are you doing, Sunny Jim? No. Past and present, new game pre. I've not played it twice, surely not. I don't know who you are, Jacob, but you're like 62 followers. What do you want to debate about? Why don't I believe in God? Oh, because humans invented it. There's plenty of evidence, ample evidence of humans doing that. Historically, there's never been one universal idea of God to be found. Every type of God you've ever heard of came from the mind of a human. All knowledge of gods come from the minds of humans. So whether it's from sheer imagination or reported divine revelation, it's completely mind dependent. There's literally no evidence of God's existence as independent entities capable of having any meaningful effect on our reality. If you disagree, feel free to present some evidence for that being the case. Logic is axiomatic, bro. I don't want to hear no half-baked tag arguments. If you want to make one, but commit to it properly. Well, I won't say I'm certain that God doesn't exist, or I wouldn't say that. But when we're talking about God as we understand it conceptually, it's completely mind dependent. It's a human invention. Is it possible, like even if we were to like switch to talking about modal possibilities now? Yes, it's possible that some kind of entity we would describe as God exists. But so far as the gods we actually talk about and report to believe in, those gods, there's no evidence of them existing. The Bible has little to do with God, to be honest. The Bible is about culture. If you actually do any kind of religious studies, you'll realize, right, in order for the God in the Bible to be real, then the Canaanite gods have to be real. The Babylonian gods, whatever the Amalekites believed in, right? The Mesopotamian gods, they all need to be real too, for the God of the Bible to be real. Because ancient Israel, well, not even ancient, right? Israel operated in what's called henotheism, and that is a system where they say each tribe has their own god, right? And under henotheism, the Israelites take the idea of God the Father from the pantheon of the Canaanites, which entails El, Elohim, the top dog, Baal, Marduk, and Asherah. Right? So in order for God in the Bible to come about, the other gods have to also exist too. If Jesus actually existed in a capacity more than just being a man, as the story goes, he would have been born a Jew, believing in Yahweh. Right, so, and when the Europeans or the Romans come about afterwards and collate the stories of Jesus into the New Testament, they decide that Jesus is also Yahweh in a Trinitarian configuration. So given that, all right, you've got a lot of things to accept on the way to be able to say that Jesus is anything more than a man. Okay. And I'm sure most of you wouldn't be willing to actually do that. Yeah. So do you want to figure out how Yahweh becomes God the Father if Baal and El Elyon are false gods? Why were their prophets battling each other? Anyways, I'm not here to waste time on religious dogma. What's important here is the God concept, and it far predates the Abrahamic traditions. It far predates the Cerberus, bro. Oh, that's what I was meant to do. I'm going to grab him, and there's no way they didn't see that. Man. So anyways, I'm saying humans invented God. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any evidence that gods exist as independent entities capable of having any meaningful effect on our reality. All knowledge of gods seems to come directly from the minds of humans for three major reasons. Reason 1, assigning agency to things we didn't understand. Reason 2, for psychological needs to give certainty where there's uncertainty. And reason 3, for societal cohesion. All good concepts vary culture to culture. Right? Well, not all, but most good concepts vary. That entails there not being any universal concept of God historically. No, please, you guys are so lame, bro. It's always denial with these guys, never any actual evidence of their claim, just pure denial. What you're looking at on the screen is all the, well, not even all, but some of the most popular known configurations of God, so I'll read them to you so you understand what I'm saying. Monotheism, as you know it today, right? The history of monotheism comes about, well, as you probably subscribe to today, comes about from the Levant. The Levant is a region of the world where Jerusalem is, where modern day Iraq is, where modern day, Israel is. It's basically where the Middle East, Africa and Europe all meet. Right? I'll show you a map in a minute. But the monotheistic idea that you hold today comes around from the history of the Levant. Right? The Levant used to operate in polytheism, then henotheism, then monotheism. Monotheism happens because the Zoroastrianists link up with the Israelites and teach the Israelites, right? They enlighten the Israelites to monotheism. Then the Israelites start to practice monotheism. But anyways, we could talk about the genealogy of your lame-ass God in a minute. But just to demonstrate what I'm saying, there's not a universal concept of God. There's always been different frameworks. So let's expand it on the screen a bit. Monotheism, one all-powerful God. That's Christianity, Islam and Judaism. Polytheism, many gods with different roles. That's Greek, Norse and Hindu. Henotheism, one main God but others exist. That's early Israel and some Hindu sects. Pantheism, God is the universe. That's Spinoza and Advaita Vedanta. It's more of a philosophical God. Panentheism, God is in all but beyond all. That's some mysticism and process theology. Deism, non-intervening creator God. That's the Enlightenment deists. Animism, spirits that inhabit nature. That's Shinto and indigenous beliefs. One of the oldest known ones. So, dualism, two opposing cosmic forces. Zoroastrianism and Gnosticism. Okay. So as I said earlier on, what does the hypothesis of humans inventing God entail? Three major phases. Phase 1 is assigning agency to things they didn't understand. That was based on a primitive use of observation. On the screen is an explainer of what this actual mechanism is, and it could be found in humans today. This is where you get people talking about ghosts and ghouls and spirits doing stuff, right? So feel free to go take a screenshot and go research this stuff for yourself. I would never force any false information on anybody. Right? I find that to be a type of evil that robs you of your agency, right? So if anything, you can trust that I'm trying to be as honorable as possible. A hyperactive agency detection device, HAD, is a cognitive theory suggesting that humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, people, spirits and ghosts. It's done to enhance survival, even when none exist. It's like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. It was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. HAD posits that a false positive, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphizing means giving things, inanimate things sometimes, human features, right? Or human capacity. Seeing purpose in randomness. So this hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing, seeing purpose in randomness, and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. So that's how phase 1 gods come about. Those phase 1 gods are usually elemental or celestial. Elemental means it pertains to things on earth, water, fire, air, right, or wind. Celestial means the stars, right? The sun, the moon, Mars, Jupiter, etc. Okay. A simple example of how this works: early human would have seen something that me and you today would describe as a thunderstorm. They would have experienced lightning for the first time, possibly, and seen the effects of lightning hitting something, potentially like blowing it up or setting on fire. And what they would have said is this, right? In few words, right? This kind of how we understand it through anthropology. Right? I have a mind, but I don't understand that event, the thunderstorm, the lightning. Therefore, there must be a mind higher than mine who's responsible for that event, the lightning, or the lightning itself is alive and it has agency. That's what assigning agency means. You see the same thing happen when, like, say you're laying in bed and you hear something go bump in the night. Your first thought is, oh shit, there's someone in the house, or oh, it's a ghost or something, right? You assign agency to the observation, to the sensory data, okay? How this happened in ancient times is they would experience the event and they would go on to build story around the event, right? Maybe in a more primitive language than what we have today, likely, right? Very likely. And that story then becomes lore, then becomes legend, and then generationally, the event that is lightning becomes deified. We find this pattern across different types of God configurations historically. The second phase of God creation is called abstraction. Humans gain the capability to move beyond simple observations and start to conceptualize abstract things that aren't actually, embodied. For instance, the idea of love. You can express love, but itself is an abstract thing. The idea of knowledge. You can express knowledge, but itself is an abstract thing. The idea of creation. You can express creation, but itself, it's an abstract thing, okay? And through the production of these abstract concepts, abstraction, the ability to abstract, they start to deify these abstract things, right? To make them like uniformed. And it's done to explain things. It's what gives certainty to uncertainty, reduces fear and death anxiety. It gives reasons to how humans come about, what happens when we die. That's the second phase of God creation. The third phase is for societal cohesion. And this is when the first two phases stack and the gods start to become anthropomorphic. So they now take on a human nature, right? And they have an abstract nature, they have a celestial nature, and they have an elemental nature. And this is done to mobilize people under ideology, right? We're moving from hunting and gathering, when we're doing agency and abstraction, into agriculture, civilization, and polis, okay? The God creations map one-to-one with human evolution, right? How we evolved biologically and societally, okay? On the screen now is a table, not even close to an exhaustive table, of gods from different regions of the world produced at different times in the world, okay? How do we know about these gods? Through archaeology, that's digging up artifacts, pottery, clay, tablets, textiles, carvings, right? And through anthropology, that's the study of humans and human history and cultures, okay? We know the names and the roles these gods played in a society through anthropology, right? And we know like the cultural effects that pertain to these gods through archaeology. So, as I just explained in the basic hypothesis of how humans invented gods and why humans invented gods, the three phases: agency, abstraction for psychological needs, and for societal cohesion. Now we look at some of these god concepts on our map, right? On our grid, on our table. Ancient Mesopotamia, which is now modern day Iraq, they had a god called Enlil. He was a god of wind, air, and storms. Well, what does that fit into? Phase 1, agency, right? We're given agency to something elemental. Egypt, Northern Africa, Ra, a sun god. Well, sun is something that is celestial, so we're given agency to the sun again, right? We're saying the sun acts on its own accord. It has a will, right? It has the capacity to act, right? He's also a creator god. Creation is abstraction. It's an abstract thing. If we say that this entity is responsible for creation, we start to give meaning to things, right? We start to try to explain things through the existence of the deity, okay? Greece, Zeus, king of gods, sky and thunder. Well, king of gods is very anthropomorphic. Anthropomorphic means it pertains to humans. It mirrors human hierarchy, right? We don't find kings in gods, we find kings in men, and then we make gods kings, right, to mirror men. Why would you make Zeus a king of the gods. It mirrors human hierarchy, and it helps societal cohesion. Now we have a hierarchy of gods, which sets up hierarchy in society. It mirrors it. Right? Temples, proto-religions, etc. It organizes humans and men. It gives reason and meaning to things. He's also the god of the sky and thunder. Again, going back to the assigning agency to elemental things. Okay, Norse, Scandinavia, Odin, wisdom, war, death, and magic. It's completely abstract. All of that is abstract. But he also operates as an anthropomorphic figure too, like Zeus, because he's the all-father of other gods like Odin. Sorry, like Thor. Right? India, South Asia, Shiva, right? God of destruction and transformation. Right? Abstraction. Okay, so when I say to you humans invented God, we could go through the whole list. Of course, if you can't see the list on the vertical YouTube, you need to come to Culture Crack on the big YouTube channel and Set West 10 on the TikTok channel if you want to see what I'm reading or what people are looking at. But historically, right, there's never been one universal concept of God from all regions and all landmasses across all people. Even to this day, right, me and you could be in the same religion, claim to believe in the same God, but interpret the way that God exists completely different from our neighbor, from our brother, from our dad, from our sister. Right? God is a concept, is an abstract concept that functions fundamentally in the human mind. Nowhere outside of the human mind can God concepts be found. The only time you get any point into a God concept outside of the human mind, right, is when other humans leave artifacts pointing to their God concept. Okay, if you was to say God is energy, right, God is the wind, God is the earth, God is, any number of abstract things, what you're pointing to is a pantheistic configuration. And when you do that, it's like saying God is like, he's synonymous with non-existence, because he could be everything and nothing. He could be here and he could be nowhere at any given time, right? So it's like in simple terms, right, with the grid on the screen for you to understand this very simply. If you had to explain this to a child, no human in human history has ever gone out onto their native land, right? Let's take the Celtics in Western Europe, modern day Britain. No one has ever gone out onto modern day Britain, right, back then, and discovered the god of the Levant, which would be Yahweh or El Elyon, right, or the god of Northern Africa, which would be Ra or Horus, right, or even the god of Greeks, which would be Zeus or Aphrodite or something, right? No one goes out onto their native land and discovers the god of another land. Gods are products of the cultures that produce them, right? If that makes sense for you to understand. Historically, there's no universal idea of God. As I said already, we can both be Christians or both be Muslims or both be Jews and have a completely different interpretation of what a God entails, right? Events that we attribute to God, right? Happenings in our lives that we we say this is God, right? Some people say, giving birth is a miracle. Other people are like, no. Miracle has to break the laws of nature. It has to be divine, People have their own understandings of God because God is fundamentally conceptual, right? It's not necessarily a concrete entity. There's no evidence of it being a concrete entity or an agent capable of having any meaningful effect on our reality, okay? People report their ideas of God, and that's just what it is, right? As I said earlier on, right? The chances are most of you are coming from a monotheistic kind of Abrahamic view on what God is, right? In modern day, the most popular view of God is what's called the three O God, right? Omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent. It's also thought to be an immaterial spirit. It's disembodied. That means it doesn't have a physical body, like a physical representation, but it's also a personal God, meaning it listens to the prayers of people and intervenes in the lives of people. There's a lot of very specific attributes, right? In order to get to those specific attributes, you have to mix philosophical concepts and theological concepts. Theology has always entailed levels like the realm of philosophy, right? But when you start getting very, very highly defined through jargon, you're talking about modern philosophy, which is the last 2,000 odd years, maybe let's say like 1,500 years to be more reasonable. But that being said, most of you, your view of what a God is coming from the Levant view, right? Which is the Abrahamics, okay? What's on the screen is the area of the world that's known as the Levant, which produces the Jews, which produces the Old Testament, which is the foundation for the New Testament and the Bible, and the foundation for Islam, okay? That is the region of the world that is on the screen currently. Who sets the ball rolling for God creation in that region of the world? Well, it's the ancient Sumerians, right? They produced what you're looking at on the screen, known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest known texts that pertain to these kinds of things. They also produce what's called the Creationist Tablet, right, which sets the foundation for what you know to be Genesis, right? The Babylonians remix it, then the Israelites remix it. Why would the Babylonians and the Israelites take ideas from the Sumerians and Mesopotamian? They're their ancestors. That'd be like saying, like, you know, why do you learn about Cromwell? like, you know, like, why do you learn about Queen Victoria, right? It's the same thing. It's literally their ancestors, you know. So got the Epic of Gilgamesh, got the Creationist Tablet, right? And there's I'll show you the Ark Tablet if we can find it. I've really got to clean this folder up. I say it every time as well. And you got your Ark Tablet, right, which is the first telling of the Great Flood, right, which then becomes the story of Noah's Ark. Okay, these things are devised by older cultures in that landmass or that region called the Levant, right? The Iraqis are very important in this as well. Like, anyways, right. All of those things, as I was saying, God concepts are not universal. So there's never been a one idea of God. Different cultures have put forth different views. But in order to get to the modern view you have of a God, which likely is an Abrahamic view, all of this stuff needs to happen, right? The ancient Sumerians need to happen. Mesopotamians, Babylonians, Canaanites, Akkadians, Amalekites, Israelites, Egyptians, right? Zoroastrianists, right? Phoenicians and Romans and Greeks, they all need to meet in the middle and exchange their ideas in order for you to get your view of God that you have today. That doesn't mean your view of God is real. If we understand the evolutionary trajectory of God creation, if anything, it demonstrates how unlikely your God is to actually exist. Okay, but your belief is your belief, right? And that's exactly what it is, a belief, right? And in the realm of religion, belief is to accept without proof. But if we've got the evidence of how the God concept is actually formed, the direct genealogy of the God of the Bible, in my view, I don't need to take it as being anything more than a cultural invention, right? Because all the evidence points to it being exactly that, you know? So anyways, let's get back to some gameplay. But yeah, like the next thing people are going to start babbling to me about is, you know, but the creationist myth is true. No, creationist myth is exactly that myth, right? Which comes from, I just showed you, the Creationist Tablet, lays the foundation for what you call Genesis, right? There's no evidence that your God exists in the capacity that could produce a world, right? Then you're going to start telling me, oh, you know, like, something can't come from nothing. Well, that's a fundamental belief for somebody that follows religion. Okay, it's not a belief that someone like me would ever say. In fact, I think the concept of nothing, you know, isn't something actual, right? It's not something concrete. It's the negation of specific things. Or I say that in another way. There is no true nothingness. Nothingness is the negation of something specific or a group of specific things. It's a semantic thing, right? But in terms of creationist myths, it's literally people who believe God created the universe out of nothing, who say that the world can come from nothing, right? In simple terms. Again, sorry to the guys on this channel, right? If you're missing the screenshots and the explainers, there's screenshots on the main channel. Well, damn. Sorry, I've got some admin problems happening.
Revenge was the only clear thought in my head. The only one I could call mine. I knew Gentek was the key. It made sense. I'd worked there. I'd had Dana investigating its operations. I remember this Black Lodge. Whatever had changed me erased my past. Must have started there. I thought if I could find out who was running Gentek before Blackwatch erased them too, I could find my past.
Yeah, Seto, if you want to see the evidence, you've got to come to the main channel. I'm literally showing evidence on the screen. You just can't see it on that channel, unfortunately. I haven't figured out a way to screen share it yet.
Tell you the truth, I never thought I'd
but I am providing evidence for what I'm saying.
Wish the hell I never had.
Bro, the Bible is a book of claims, bro. I'll put it to you like this. If that is your level of thinking currently, then you're just not equipped for these type of conversations yet. You got to do a lot more studying. The Bible is a book of claims, not evidence. And to be frank with you, religion is a different topic to God, really. Religion pertains more to humans and human culture than actual God concepts. God concepts predate religions by tens of thousands of years. Again, how can we know this? Because we have artifacts and we have anthropology. So yeah, like, with all due respect, no one cares what your religion has to say. Do you know how many religions there are in the world? No one cares. Only the people within your religion care. But like I said, me, someone who's looked at the genealogy of your God, I can comfortably say that. What's up, Carp? How you doing, bro? Someone we gotta get up there. It's a shame we can't play Elden Ring, man. That's what I wanted to play, but this controller's just jacked up right now. This one of those games is kind of hard to play and talk at the same time. It's not very cinematic either, is it? So yeah, back to the main topic. My name is Set. I'm a YouTuber. I make long form content designed to make you think. The topic of the stream is humans invented God. When I say humans invented God, it's called an explanatory claim. I feel it has explanatory success because we got the how, we got the why, and in some instances we got the when and the where. It also has predictive power based on any type of God concepts or God beliefs we might come across in the future, without having to posit the actual existence of supernatural entities. How can we support this claim? Through archaeology, artifacts found in the ground left behind by humans. Archaeology, artifacts found in the ground left by humans. Anthropology, the study of human cultures and histories. We've got some cognitive theories on our side. We've got some psychoanalysis on our side. We've got evolution on our side. So it's a very solid case in terms of presenting evidence for something. But yeah, if you want to know my personal position, it's this. Right? All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your God requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It's likely it requires somebody to devise a concept of God and impart that to you for you to interact with, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. As far as I'm aware, there's never been evidence of a God existing as a independent entity, right? When I say independent, I mean mind independent, so it doesn't require I didn't mean to do that. It doesn't require anyone to view it or conceptualize it in order for it to exist, right? And when I say like an independent agent, it means it has a capacity to act on its own, right? There's never been evidence that an entity like that exists in any kind of meaningful way. But yeah, what's on the screen is Ex Nihilo. I forgot to explain it for the guys on the other stream, right? So Ex Nihilo is basically Latin. It's Creatio Ex Nihilo. It's Latin for creation out of nothing. It's a foundational Christian doctrine. It's not just Christian. It's the Jews subscribe to this. The Muslims subscribe to this. Other cultures across the planet have a variation of this too, right? But creation ex nihilo, Latin for creation out of nothing, is a foundational Christian doctrine that God created the universe, including all matter, energy, and time and space, from absolute nothingness, rather than shaping pre-existing material. It affirms God's total independence, sovereignty, and role as the ultimate originator, distinguishing him from the creation. So why is that on the screen? Because, you know, your average believer is going to be like, oh, so you believe something comes from nothing. Like, this is just proof that they believe something comes from nothing, and they're in fact, as usual, projecting their beliefs onto people who don't believe that. That's why it's on the screen. Alright, so anyways, right, feel free to present some kind of evidence. I'll put it to you like this, right? If you're saying your God interacts with our physical material reality, then the type of evidence I'd be looking for would be something empirical. not empirical in a simplistic kind of way, right? There's a certain level of criteria it would need to fulfill. One, it would have to defeat all competing hypotheses, right? Two, it would have to be mind independent, so it can't just be how do I do this? That's how you do it. It would have to be mind independent, so it can't just be someone's anecdotal personal testimony, right? It would have to transcend cultures and religions, so it can't just be for, God's chosen people in its favorite religion, right? It has to be open to research. It needs to be testable and measurable. Okay, that's if all of that criteria was if you're saying that your God actually interacts with our physical materiality. If you're saying your God is more of a metaphysical framework, there may be a really good logical proof, perhaps in the form of a syllogism, would do for that type of God. Why do I say it like this? It's because of this. If to be a believer, right, is to be in a catch-22. The more you define a God, the less likely it is to show up based on the attributes you assign to it. The less you define a God is the more synonymous it is with non-existence. Right? On your highly defined end, you got biblical types of gods, right? That means gods that do specific things, that have specific attributes, like they're omniscient, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, I can never remember which it is. They're 3-0, right? They sometimes interact with humans. They sometimes come down as men. They sometimes have children, right? They listen to the prayers of people. These are highly specific attributes. So that's a biblical end of gods. And on the other end, where you're more synonymous with non-existence, you're talking about your metaphysical or philosophical types of gods, which could be pantheistic or panentheistic, right? They're not well defined. They just operate as frameworks. They don't necessarily have agency. So that's what I mean by that. Now that I've laid that out, you should know what type of evidence you would be going about looking for to persuade someone of the existence of your God. But as it stands, you are talking to someone who is pretty certain, right? Not 100%, right? Hence change my mind, that all gods are cultural human inventions. But yes, if you were to try to give a substantial case that would change my mind, that's the two criteria you're looking at. Yeah, but you are aware there are different types of logic too, right? So, again, I don't really want to get too lost in the Phil Bro kind of realm. It's good to know this kind of stuff, but you also should be aware of something put forward by a dude called Wittgenstein, right, or Wittgenstein, right? Which basically says language pertains to what's called formal language games. When we're talking about a specific subject, we have jargon devised for that specific subject, and it doesn't necessarily transcend that specific subject. A lot of Filbro argumentation resides in that world. So you could have a guy here who subscribes to these particular axioms and presuppositions, and what's the other word? Propositions, and then you can have someone that subscribes to a different set of those things, a different set of rules that applies to a different game. So it's more to do with linguistic combat than it is to do with actual realities, right? But that doesn't mean language isn't important in describing our reality. I'm just trying to make that clear for you in terms of, the debate realm of things, right? It's good to know, but it's not usually considered as good solid evidence for God. So it's just more about mental frameworks and schools of thought combating. Well, it'd be funny. Right, so Yahweh, the personal name of the God of Israel, represented by the Tetragrammaton, YHWH, originated as an ancient Semitic deity in the southern Levant Midian region, likely during the Late Bronze or Early Iron Age. often associated with storm and war. So that's his nature first. Yahweh emerged as the national god of Israel and Judah, eventually evolving into the focus of monotheism through a process of syncretism, with the high god El and a separation from local cults like Baal. Right? Well, to say Baal is a local cult is a little bit inaccurate. Baal is just another entity or deity under the rulership of El Elyon, right, or Elohim. Yahweh becomes what's known as God the Father in the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's Jesus' daddy, or Jesus in a Trinitarian configuration. Right? If Jesus actually existed and was born as a Jew, Yahweh is who he would have been talking to when he's talking about God the Father. Okay, but in order to get Yahweh, the Canaanite god has to be sampled from. Zoroastrianism has to be interacted with. Right? So, as I said already, since I understand the genealogy of your God, I've got no reason to think it exists in that capacity. It's more about culture. To be honest with you, right, I don't think the Jesus that's spoken about in the New Testament existed in that capacity in the first place. If I was being charitable, I would say it's possible that there was a Bronze Age Judaic priest called Yeshua who studied under John the Baptist and had some disciples. His disciples may have thought of him as the Messiah told by the Jews, right? But the rest of society didn't. When he passed away, there were various different sects who got hold of his teachings or his legend, and they spun it up into more mythicism, or mysticism, if you will, right? Those cults and tribes went about doing their own thing, mixing their ideas with Roman ideas, Phoenician ideas, Greek ideas, and Hebrew ideas. Right? So there's very different splinter groups talking about this apparent dude and his teachings. So also, there's more than one Jesus, which is another conversation. Right? But when that guy allegedly died, his disciples and various followers of him started to express the myths around him in different places. At a certain point in European history, which is the meeting of the Roman Empire with Hebrews and Greeks and Phoenicians, they decided to codify Christianity into what you now know as the New Testament. At the time when they were forming this idea of the New Testament, it was what was put together is called the Council of Nicaea. But prior to that, there were various different splinter groups following the apparent teachings of Jesus and telling the story of Jesus in their own way. There are two major schools arose out of those various sects of Christians running about. One was a group of people who are described as following a guy called Arius or Arian or something like that, and their view was that no, Jesus is not God in a Trinitarian configuration. He's just like a prophet. He represents the same thing happening in the Levant. And another group of people's interpretation was no, he is actually God in flesh, right, manifest. The Council of Nicaea was put together to codify all of this into one singular entity. Why was it codified into one singular entity? Because the Roman Empire was about to take it on as the state religion and needed to be able to control the final narrative, which what gives rise to the Vatican, etc. There's lots of history behind this. But that being said, knowing all of that, I have no reason to think the Judaic Bronze Age priest Yeshua is necessarily the same guy spoken about in the New Testament, because there is no evidence of the miraculous events surrounding Yeshua as now known as Jesus. There's no evidence for the magical birth, with Mary. There's no evidence for the miracles happening. There's no evidence for the resurrection. These are stories told within the New Testament. And even within the Bible, these various different accounts coming from, the Gospels, there's a lot of contradictions. There's a lot of mistakes happening. People telling the same story in a different way. Okay? That being said, your religion is completely secondary to God as a concept, as a conversation, because the God conversation, specifically in the region of the Levant, far predates Jesus and Christianity. God as a concept far predates any known religion at this date, right? I can show you artifacts that go back to 35,000 to 40,000 BCE, and these artifacts are thought to pertain to religious figurines, right? Spiritual concepts. So as far as God as a concept goes, that is with humans. Religion is about human culture, codified. Right? When you talk about a culture codified, you're taking in the morals or the ethics of a group of people, geographical facts about where they live, historical events about their ancestors, their spiritual or supernatural beliefs, the foods they ate, their poetry, their language, their writings, and you're putting that all into a book. Why do you put it all into a book? To preserve their culture. The Old Testament was devised to preserve the culture of the Jews, right? The Hebrews. Same thing with the Torah. But why does the story of the Jews need to be codified? Well, they need to keep track of what happened in their ancestry, the Levant region, right? Their interactions with the Babylonians, the Canaanites, the Amalekites, the Mesopotamians, all the way up to the Sumerians. All of that is entailed in the Torah and in the Old Testament. The New Testament is devised by empire, and it's the bridging of the Greek world with the Hebrew world, right? So there's no reason to take the New Testament as being part of the true canon, which comes from the Levant, right? That's just something that people decide to do through religion. But religion finally, right, to be clear, pertains to culture of individual humans from places, right? But God concepts are found across cultures, across regions, across times. There's never been a universal one, just different versions. But as I explained earlier in the show, we've got the how and the why. The how, assigning agency to things we don't understand. The why, for psychological needs and for societal cohesion. We've got various different configurations coming out of those three reasons. So, what's up, Goat Man? I see you, bro. But as so far as you using God to explain the universe, again, that's a religious type of thing you're doing there. In my personal opinion, God concepts don't have that kind of explanatory power. If I give you like a simplistic analogy, right? You're chilling one day and your son walks in and says, "Daddy, how does the light work? Where does the light come from?" Pointing to the light bulb in your room. You say to him, "Oh, well, God done it, son. God created the light, right?" All right, so the child buys into the story. All right, so what is God? What does God do, right? Well, God is an immaterial spirit, right? So he's not like a physical man like me and you. Okay, all right, so say the kid buys into that explanation of what God is. All right, now, Daddy, but how does God make the light? Well, son, God works in mysterious ways. Do you know why you're going to have to say God works in mysterious ways? Because how do you explain the mechanisms in which a supernatural spirit, immaterial spirit, produces a physical material thing, e.g. the light? Okay, you cannot do that. So you've now failed to explain what the light is, how the light functions, and failed to explain where it comes from. That analogy, like, transfers over to you trying to explain the universe and the earth and human life. You don't have explanatory success by using a supernatural entity. And it goes back to what was on the screen about 10 minutes ago. You're subscribing to what's called ex nihilo. You're saying God can create stuff out of nothing. So you're really failing to explain the nature of the natural phenomena, and you really don't understand the nature of the supernatural entity to be able to do it. Okay, so it's fine for you to believe that, right? But in terms of actually being able to demonstrate it and explain it robustly, you can't. No group of people in history have been able to. Okay. Oh, I forgot we could do that. Yeah, I think we need to get a disguise, you know. This mission was annoying. No, God is the supernatural entity, not the natural phenomena. Well, if you think, actually, you're entitled to think God is the natural phenomenon. If you're a pantheist, maybe, right? You're totally entitled to think that. But again, that to me is a fine view from a philosophical point of view, but it kind of puts you everywhere and nowhere at the same time, right? So, I always mess up the pronunciation, but you're just unable to differentiate God from anything else at that point. God is synonymous with non-existence at that point. It could be anything and nothing at all. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think contradictions can be true. So that's the problem that you're having there. Alright, we need to get a disguise. Assume a military disguise. Alright, we've got to try to catch someone that's not in that little radius there. I'm sure the military didn't see me just jumping. They didn't see that. There's nothing strange here at all. Alright, all we're going to have to do is get a cooldown period. Yeah, they see me already. Let's let them cool down. So what we're saying in chat though, anyways, I'm sorry for the yapping, but I'm trying to explain things for people in a way they can understand. So if you're just tuning in, my name is Set. I'm a YouTuber. I make long form content designed to make you think. I'm saying humans invented God. That's what's called an explanatory claim. I feel it has explanatory success, being that we know the how, the why, and in some instances the when and the where. It also has predictive power when considering God beliefs and religions and configurations of gods that we might come across in the future, without having to posit the necessary existence of any kind of supernatural entity. Necessary is probably the wrong word to use there, because it kind of implies something else. But yeah, I can walk you through the how and the why, and in some instances the when and the where. My hypothesis is that it happens in three main stages. Stage 1 is assigning agency to things we didn't understand. It would have been more primitive and based on observational things like elementals, you know, earth, wind, water, fire, and celestials, stars, the sun, the moon. Okay. The second phase of God creation would have been through abstraction, as we develop the capability to conceptualize and think abstractly. It's no longer just observational based. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Phase 3 would be for societal cohesion. Now we start, when did that happen? Now we start to stack God concepts together and anthropomorphize the gods. I'll bring up a grid in a minute and show you how this plays out in human history with God creations. But those are the main three phases: assigning agency to things, abstraction for psychological needs, and for societal cohesion. And you could argue that it's necessary that God concepts evolve with human capability in order to get to where it is now. And that trajectory being accounted for, there's no telling what our view of what God is in the future will be. It will literally transform with our understanding. So we need to break this.
You're gonna have to be careful around these things.
No. What we're going to do is just rush it. I forgot how to change the... Let's just break them. Yeah, you just got here, bro. So the way I'm using the word God is as a category definer, because I'm aware of all the different types of concepts of gods. So when I say a category definer, I'm just speaking in terms of, like, when I say God, most people understand that I'm pointing to a supernatural entity or deity. How that God appears depends on which type of God we're talking about. If we're talking about like a classical theistic God, like a immaterial spirit. If we're talking about a pantheistic God, maybe an anthropomorphic, elemental or celestial or abstract God. It really depends on which God you subscribe to. If you're talking philosophically, then perhaps like a pantheistic God. So when I use the word God, I'm talking plural gods, humans invented God, plural. And I'm talking about all types of gods, just to be clear. It's you who would have to tell me what God you subscribe to, and we can look into that specifically. But the fact that you subscribe to a certain type of God that someone else doesn't points to what I'm talking about. Gods being cultural inventions in the first place. Oh, that could work if we could get it on point. Where's he go? How did that miss? Alright, let's change. This game is so scary, bro. Oh, I'm dead. I'm dead. Kick it, bro. Oh, okay. Wrong button, no wonder. That worked. Oh, dear. Alright. Anyways, right, I'm saying humans invented God. My position is all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. When I say psychological construct, it's just me saying gods are immaterial ideas that exist in the realm of your mind. Right? When I say, yeah, so anyways, all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. Right? If your god requires imagination, belief, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. Did they see that? They saw that. So what was the point then? Oh, that's why. Thanks for follow. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's just your interpretation, Beerus, in all honesty. I don't see that to be the case. I think we function in more of like a symbiotic kind of nature. If it was the intention of God to have like harmonious existence for his creation, like he'd want the best for each creation, why would he design it so that you must consume life in order to sustain life? Right? I think that points much more to evolution for survival than from the the good intentions of a creator. Maybe that wasn't as clear as I could have made it though, but I think that's just your interpretation or your view. But reality seems to represent something a bit more brute than that. Oh, I need the disguise to go in there. The water isn't blue. I'll put it to you like this, right? If I try not to make claims about where the universe comes from, why it comes about, or where humans come from, why we come about. But if I had to choose between an ancient creationist myth coming from the Mesopotamians, passed down to the Babylonians and the Israelites, to the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews, I would choose the current scientific understanding or the current scientific explanation over the creationist myth any day. I think if you talk to a modern theologian, they'll let you know Genesis isn't supposed to be taken as like an accurate account of events. It's supposed to be taken metaphorically or allegorically, because there's too much evidence against it at this point in time. But you can choose to believe that God created the universe, how many billion years specifically that you should exist today. You can choose to believe that. That makes you feel special, like the water in a puddle, then go for it. Or the water in a hole that becomes the puddle. But there's plenty of evidence to suggest how we actually got here. Yeah, why does the Pope have power? Because of the Vatican, because of the Roman Empire, because of Christendom. These aren't good things. These are definitely not good things. No, I wouldn't say it's fair to say we create reality, right? Again, you could have some kind of a metaphysical view that your conscious mind is shaping reality. I don't subscribe to that personally. I think there are definitely things that are discovered, and then there are definitely things that are invented. This is one of those things that are invented. I don't think humans are responsible for creating reality per se. I'm not even 100% certain on what people would call reality at this point, which is a bit skeptical, but yeah. But yeah, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think a better way to say it is there are things that happen naturally, right, without any agency's intervention, any human intervention, any supernatural intervention. I don't. That's what I'm saying. I don't think it's a who or a what. As I was saying, if I had to choose between a creationist myth and a current understanding, the universe can come about through purely natural means. So can the Earth. So can all life on Earth. to me, that makes a lot more sense than there being a specific entity with the intentions or the mechanisms to do so. One is very easily explained, while the other is like a lot of conjecture and beliefs and stuff. It's wholly unfalsifiable. So, if I had to choose between the two, I'm taking the current scientific understanding. So the current scientific understanding doesn't posit the existence of any supernatural entities to bring about the universe or life on Earth. Yeah, exactly. As I said earlier on, if your God requires belief, imagination, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. In the most respectful way possible, that's a giant cope, you know. It's a nice embedded psychological trick for a religion. If something exists, or at least has the capacity to exist, I don't think it necessitates your belief in it in order for it to be there. So, and also think beliefs aren't something you necessarily just choose. You have to be convinced of a certain set of information or certain propositions first in order to even begin to have faith in something or belief in something. If you're not convinced by those propositions, then there's no way you're going to be able to just pick up and start believing stuff that you've just been told. So, call me skeptic, but I don't see an all-knowing, all-powerful entity needing that. Oops. No. I ran out of bullets. Where's my blades? I think I have to buy all my stuff again, don't I? Yeah, gotta buy the skills again, I think. Oh yeah, so give me a reason to think your God exists and it's capable of creating anything. As I'm pretty sure, the idea is coming from a creationist myth, so it's not really supportable. Bro, lock in, bro. Ooh, that's not a dive. Oh, that's it. Yeah, I think we got to buy some attacks. Yeah, your religion doesn't really matter in this conversation, with all due respect. God, as a concept, far predates your religion. I know the genealogy of your God, so I've got no reason to listen to what your religion has to say about your God, even though I have listened to what your religion has to say. And I know more than I actually ever wanted to know about it. But yeah, none of those, like, they're weak points. They're not good starters for evidence. Things can definitely exist mind independent, right? I've got no reason to think the planet won't go on living if I cease to exist. I've not got any reason to think that. My perception of the planet will cease, but it doesn't mean the planet itself will cease or anything else that exists. So I don't get why you should have that view. Yeah, that's a part of it, Hampton, right? But as I always say, religion is about culture. Right? It's about keeping alive the culture of specific people and their views. It's not really about God. God supersedes religion by far, especially if one exists. Right? Even if a God exists, it doesn't mean any one religion would be right about it or actually have anything to do with it at all. It could be a deistic God for all we know. It could be a pantheistic God for all we know. It could be a henotheistic system for all we know. So religion it's really about people, humans, and the way they organise their society, more than it is about gods. Now, humans create gods to help organise society for sure. But so far as what your religion has to say about a god, it's really mostly unfalsifiable and just not demonstrable at all. We're dead. Unless... Punch him up, bro. Come on. Where's all the powers, bro? Oh, we can kick. But we can't dodge. Where's the dodge? Oh, I'm so dead. Do you know what I think I need to do? I need to grab these small guys. Oh, it's too late. Early game L's. It's coming. I can feel it. Why didn't I use a tank? Oh, you can't yet. There we go. He's got his armor on, so running into them just kills him directly. The game is prototypes, like 2009, about that time. Don't die. Move. Bro. There we go. Yeah, you can document anything you want. I mean, put it this way, if like someone came today and said we have to write an essay every single day for the next 365 days about Harry Potter, does all of us producing essays about Harry Potter for 365 days make Harry Potter any more real? It doesn't, does it? We can even approach Harry Potter scientifically if we want to. Still wouldn't make Harry Potter real. That's what I'm saying, they're very weak arguments in terms of what we're talking about, which is God. If you actually want to set about looking for evidence for your God, I'd put it to you like this. If you're going to say your God interacts with our physical material reality, then I'd want to see some empirical evidence. Some of the basic criteria for that empirical evidence that needs to be met is this. It needs to transcend cultures and religions, so it can't be for God's favourite people and his favourite religion. It needs to be for everyone. It can't be mind dependent, meaning someone's anecdotal testimony. It needs to be objectively verifiable or mind independent. Someone else can come along and check it. It needs to be measurable, and it needs to defeat all competing hypotheses. That's some of the criteria. Maybe I didn't fully flesh that out for you, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff you want to look for as proof for your gods. If you're going to pull up scripture, it'd be the same as me pulling up an ancient artifact left by an Egyptian. Look, this Egyptian carved something about Horus and Osiris, therefore Horus and Osiris are real. No, that's not how that works, right? So, yeah, humans leave things to do with their gods all the time. It doesn't make the gods exist. In fact, everything we know about gods comes from the minds of humans in the first place. Man, let's bury them. Do you know what? I remember now that like the final boss in this game was actually ridiculously hard. And this is it's even mid-game yet. No dodge. Come on, bro. What in the... Really, bro? Right, yeah, and that's the other thing. There are different types of evidences as well. But to not get too sidetracked, my position is this: all known gods are psychological constructs, do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires imagination, belief, or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It's likely it needs somebody to devise the concept of God and impart it to you for you to interact with, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any evidence of a god existing as an independent entity capable of having any meaningful effect on our physical reality. So yeah, if I had to explain this simplistically to a child, At no time in human history has anyone gone out onto their native land and discovered the god of another land. And there's never been a universal idea of a god. Every culture has produced their own concepts for their own needs. I am crushed, bro. That's one. No, God absolutely is a concept, an abstract concept at that, right? Some might say it's what's called an unsaturated concept, meaning it doesn't have any physical or object to attach to it. I'll give you an analogy, right? Try to hold the image of an orange in your mind, right? So you know what an orange is. It also has a colour named after it. So the fruit, an orange, right? Hold an image of an orange in your mind. Now, I want you to hold that same image, but I want you to take away the texture from the orange. I want you to take away the shape from the orange. I want you to take away the smell from the orange, the taste from the orange, the colour from the orange. Are you still able to hold that image of the orange in your mind now that it's lost its primary and secondary characteristics? Okay? You were doing all of that conceptually in your mind, right? But now that the orange itself has been reduced to nothing more than just a word, you can see, right, how the orange only becomes saturated once it's attached to an object, the actual entity or the actual thing that is the orange itself, right? God is similar to that, but God doesn't have any saturation in terms of there being an object to match to it. God exists as a container that you fill with other concepts. So you have to attribute things to God. Right? You have to say, oh, he's omniscient, he's omnipotent, he's omnibenevolent. Right? You know, he listens to my prayers. He can get angry. He can love. Right? He can have wrath. These are attributes you must assign to the empty container that is a God in order for it to have any meaningful existence to you. Okay. So, God absolutely is an abstract concept, and being that there are other different types of abstract concepts, he would be what's considered a fictional character, okay, until demonstrated otherwise. You can't like, thanks to, I think his name, I think it was Michelangelo, who gave you the picture of Jesus. Outside of the religious creations, you can't really hold an image of a god in your mind like that. You would always have to associate it to something elemental at base, if you could, or celestial. Beyond that, it's completely abstract. Was it Leonardo? Yeah, so give me a reason to think supernatural exists anyway. Give me a reason to think that. I can see it as like some kind of explanatory device when you don't understand something. You know, like what was that saying? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I can see you falling prey to that in terms of supernatural entities as well. But give me a reason to think that exists. Oh yeah, I've heard of the Shroud of Turin, bro. I don't think that's the type of evidence you want to look for, though, to be honest with you. It's time to get a coffee so we can start looking at some explainers if you want. But yeah, Shroud is not the type of evidence you want to see, bro, for a god. Have a mosey of what's on the screen. I'm just going to put it in a kettle. So yeah, like most people don't take the Shroud of Turin to actually be a real thing, right? It's thought of as a work of art at best, okay? And again, not to get too lost off into religious conversations, because again, like, Jesus just pertains to one religion, in all honesty. And that has real world connotations, specifically what we see happening with Israel, Zionism and all that shit. Like Christendom, historically, Roman Empire. Has real world connotations, but so far as an actual guy that potentially existed as a magical god man, there's not really good evidence of that. JG, you need to come to the main channel to see what's on the screen. Anyone else watching over there on the vertical YouTube, you got to come to the main channel or the TikTok at Set West 10. It's a shame we can't get the YouTube to actually function properly how a YouTube channel should function. I think it's mostly my own fault for spurging off and doing all these different types of creations, so there's no like consistent through line of what happens on my channel. So people be like, yeah, I came from the religious debates, and people be like, yeah, I came for the anime explainers, yeah, I came for the cultural critique, and it's like everyone's just seeing content that they don't really want to see at the wrong time. But I can't help that, man. I don't like formula. I'll be right back. So, right, the base of what I'm saying is that humans invented God. The why and how is like this, right? From my view, my hypothesis, if you will. It's 3 phases. The first phase is a more primitive humans doing what's called assigning agency to things. In simple terms, assigning agency to things looks like, seeing lightning happen and then thinking the lightning is acting of its own accord, right? The lightning is just doing things because it wants to do it. That's what assigning agency looks like. Now, of course, it's more complicated than that, but humans have this we still have this built-in survival mechanism that allows for assigning agency to things, right? I'll give you an explainer. It's on the screen so you can read it for yourself or go investigate a bit more if you will. But I think this is a very good foundational theory on the how God creation happens. Of course, imagination and observation plays into it, but in terms of like putting those 2 things together, right, for like a substantial reason to do it, I think this explains it the best. A hyperactive agency detection device is a cognitive theory suggesting that humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, people, spirits and gods. Hence why you still see people use it today. It's done to enhance survival even when none exist, right? So even when there's no people there, no ghosts, no gods, right? They still blame ghosts, people and gods, right? So I'll read it again without interjecting kind of thing. So a hyperactive agency detection device, also known as HAD, is a cognitive theory suggesting that humans have an evolved built-in tendency to quickly attribute events and movements to intentional agents, people, spirits and gods. It's done to enhance survival even when none exist, acts like a mental smoke detector for threats, which explains beliefs in the supernatural and feelings of being watched. It was coined by a guy called Justin Barrett. HAD posits that a false positive, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. In action, what that looks like is you got a group of hunters and gatherers. They go out hunting and one person sees a bush rustle, right, and they think straight away there's something in that bush, and another person sees a bush rustle and they don't do anything. They just freeze, right? The person that sees the bush rustle and assumes there's an animal in it is using hyperactive agency detection device. The reason it's done is so he will survive by running away from the bush, okay? The guy who doesn't run away is more likely to be eaten by something that's in the bush, right? That's what that looks like. So It was coined by Justin Barrett. Had posits that a false positive, seeing an agent where there isn't one, was safer in ancestral environments than a false negative, missing a real threat. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphizing literally just means giving something human attributes or human nature. This hypersensitivity leads to anthropomorphizing, seeing purpose in randomness, and forms the foundation for religious beliefs. So I think that's part of the how, right? And it also speaks to the why. Right? But in terms of phases of God creation, there's assigning agency using had, then there's abstraction, right? Gaining the ability to conceptualize and think about abstract things that don't actually have a physical representation. Why would you want to do that? All right. Well, first, you would deify the agency that you would deify elemental things by assigning agency to it, right? So you now say that the lightning is a mind of its own, right? The sun is a mind of its own. But now you move on to abstract ideas like war and love and creation, right? And then because these things are not observational themselves, you come up with the concept, then you deify the concept. So you can create some kind of physical representation. Sometimes it's just symbology, right? Sometimes it's just an utterance, right, to an entity, right? Other times it's a physical carving, but we'll not get too deep into that yet. So why the abstraction is done, right, is to give psychological certainty where there's uncertainty, right? You can start coming up with things for explanatory power. Even if you don't have an actual answer, you can say, yeah, the sun rose because Ra wanted it to rise so that life may be given, or so that the heat would raise the crops up, or whatever, you know? You can start coming up with explanatory power through abstraction. Now you stack agency, assigning an abstraction, and then you move into third phase God creation. We're coming out of hunting and gathering into agriculture and polis. Polis is a word for like city or civilization, right? As we begin to build civilizations and cities, we start to stack these concepts together, and they start to produce what's called anthropomorphic gods, right? Gods that have human features and human natures. They can now speak. They can now act. They can now experience love, right? They can now experience anger and wrath, you know, and express these things. They can create things like actual tools and weapons. And by doing that, we create systems that mirror human hierarchies. So the gods display our features directly as humans now, but they also have an elemental nature, and a celestial nature, and an abstract nature. Sometimes all three, or sometimes just embodying one, right? But this is done for societal cohesion, because now we can organize people under temples, proto-religions, and ideologies, right? Think Athena, think any number of other god concepts that operate like that, right? But it's not just in ancient Greece that this starts to happen. It literally happens in every place where civilization kind of comes about. Again, who really sets the ball rolling for the god concepts in terms of the big three is the Mesopotamians, the Sumerians, right? So if you look on the screen, again, people who've been with me for a long time on the stream, they know exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm going to say is like, fucking hell, bro, you going to say something else? No, right? Because new people are coming all the time, and some old people need a refresher, right? So, given that I just gave you the hypothesis in the three phases, assigning agency to things we don't understand, abstraction for psychological needs, and three for societal cohesion, now we're going to look at some real world examples that embody this hypothesis, right? So, ancient Mesopotamia, the Sumerians, like I was just talking about, kind of, right? So it's modern day Iraq. They produce a god called Enlil. It's a god of wind, air, and storms, right? What does that represent? Assigning agency to something elemental, right? Egypt, Northern Africa, they produce a god called Ra. That's a sun god and a creator god. So now you've got assigning agency to the sun. Now you've got abstraction, a creator god. Right? Ra is also anthropomorphic, but we'll kind of leave that into a minute. Right? Again, we talk these gods are now produced where they're civilization. There's more ancient ideas of gods before it's like fully civilized, but just for the sake of explaining. Greece, Europe, we get Zeus. That's a king of gods and a god of sky and thunder, right? King of gods is directly anthropomorphic. It mirrors human hierarchy. Okay, you don't find kings on the ground in the sky, right? You find kings amongst men. Okay, why might you do that? Well, it mirrors human hierarchy, right? It sets up a foundation for how we're going to organize society. Okay, these are like not necessarily like, I forget the word. They're just like societal frameworks, like But anyways, he's also the god of sky and thunder. Right, that's again assigning agency to elemental things. Norse, Scandinavia, Odin, god of wisdom, war, death, and magic. Completely abstract, right? But he's also anthropomorphic, as he has the features of a man and he has sons, etc. Okay, so you can see how the three phases of God creation actually play out in human history. We can get more into it in a minute, but I'm feeling a little bit sicky. Yeah, I played Infamous on stream actually. I still need to finish one on stream. But yeah, we can play some Infamous. I don't know, right? Me personally, I don't really subscribe to the view that humans are just innately rational, reasonable beings. I don't think that's true. I think that came about in a certain period of European history where it became like cool to think of things that way, but I don't think it's necessarily true. I don't think any organism evolves for truth. They evolve for survival and whatever pertains to the greatest number of survival or the greatest opportunity of survival. So I don't necessarily think it's true that like humans are just innately rational. Like, I don't think that's true. That's just my opinion though. My controller broke, so I can't play Elden Ring. Well, at least not on stream for some reason. Ah, thank you. So anyways, right, I'm saying humans invented God, and all known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If you've got some evidence of that not being true, I'd like to hear it, I'd like to know. As far as I understand it, there's never been evidence of God existing as an independent entity, right, capable of having any meaningful effect on our physical reality. All God concepts, all knowledge of gods come directly from the minds and the cultures of humans historically. This is just I mean, you could try and debate it, but I would like to know what other frame of reference you can use beyond being human. That being said, if your God concept requires imagination, belief, or faith in order to interact with it, I think it'd be reasonable to say it doesn't really exist in any meaningful way outside of your mind. So you can choose to think what you want to think. You can choose to believe what you want to think. Believe what you want to believe, right? But it's what you can represent to be true. Right? It's what kind of direction you can point someone else in to go see the facts for themselves. Yeah, so that is part of the reason, but societal cohesion has long moved past the need of gods, the need for gods. In fact, civilizations were fully formed and functional before we had like formalized god concepts anyway. God concepts just help organize people, right? But truthfully, if we actually examine a bit closer, God concepts create what's called ideological rifts, and because of these ideological rifts, you get people competing and going to war with each other. My God against your God, my ideology against your ideology, right? The gods be with us kind of thing. Historically, you see this play out in nearly all civilizations, right? But yeah, at this point in time, we don't actually, to be honest, we never did need gods to tell us what was right and what was wrong, because all ideas of right and wrong are being not transmuted, but like kind of translated through gods as sock puppets. The prescribed right and wrong is ultimately coming from a human like you, but they're doing it via a god. Ultimately, humans have had moral frameworks before we had language, right? So we had non-verbal communication and still had moral and ethical frameworks. It's how we help ensure survival in a utilitarian kind of way. So gods were never really necessary to tell you what is right and wrong. It's just that it's easier to explain that to somebody that's not really willing to do the work, you know. Again, every other stream we get into this idea about ethics and how religious people have a very lacking view of it. Have you never not seen yes men run around the internet telling people to go and look at a specific guy? So I do love a good projection, don't I? But shit, it's up to you to believe what you want to believe. How about you represent yourself in this conversation, or your own views, and then we'll see for ourselves if they stand up to scrutiny. How about that, Azar? Well, alone, right? If you're saying God isn't a concept, then what is God? How does one find it? How does one interact with it? Can one find it and interact with it? What is it to you? As far as I understand, there are different concepts of what gods are, what that entails. But so far as it being a thing that exists independently of us, I have nothing to tie that down. Oh, that's just that's like a poetic way of taking a pantheistic view. What is God? Sounds poetic, but you're just saying everything is God. But like I said, it's not yeah, it's not very good, put it that way, in terms of a view. It's not the worst view to have, but it's not very good. I think you can be a very shining example of a human being in multiple arenas in life without having anything to do with a god, bro. Again, I would agree that we're all fallible, but in terms of having anything to do with gods and sin and anything like that, I have no good reason to subscribe to that. Well, they used to, right? But just look at what's going on in the world right now. It's the big three still blowing each other to smithereens, still causing economic suffering, right? It's literally religious people doing all these things still to this day. I understand the satanic panic, but when you actually look at it, right, who has the power, who has the machinery, who has the weaponry, who's running the social and economic systems? It's people who purport to be under these religious views. And it has been like that for like at least 2,000 years, bro. Well, a little less than 2,000 years. So it's like, obviously religion isn't what's holding society together. It's a facet of it, but it was never the primary thing. I think it's ultimately human nature that holds societies together. Whether you take some mixture of ethical views or just one specific school of thought. It's us. It's not necessarily these institutions that we develop. No, see, you're making a huge mistake by saying, oh, they're not real followers because they don't do something that you want them to do. Right? That's like a no true Scotsman fallacy. You can't say that you're more Christian than the Pope. You can't say you're more Jew than, Netanyahu. You can't say you're more Muslim than the Ayatollah. Right? You can't do that. Okay? You could try. You could, as an individual, you could feel you are for sure. But in terms of the amount of followers, like not in a social media way, meaning like the amount of social credit and clout those individuals have representing their creed or their religion, it far surpasses yours as an individual follower. Okay. So when you try to scapegoat it to, oh no, they're not real Christians, they're not real Muslims, they're not real Jews, that's just a cope, with all due respect. Anyone that embodies the ideology of something represents that group of people. Whether they represent it well or poorly makes no difference, right? Me as an individual, I will judge the whole group of an ideology based on what it produces. So now if I look around and I can like reasonably characterize these religious institutions as like death cults in a very succinct way, then it's obvious that they're producing people with that ideology, or else that wouldn't be playing out in the world, right? That's what I would say. Yes, because I'm talking about the ideology, JG. The ideology produces that, right? Like we were just talking about with morality and ethics, there are things, for instance, most religious institutions and structures prescribe what's called divine command theory. That means something is good because God says it's good, or the religious text itself says it's good. You take that kind of thinking added with hermeneutics, homiletics, right, and like special interpretations of scripture, you're literally signing the certificate of death, like death certificates of people across the world, because you're giving them the right to go and play out these like sadistic ideologies via the word of their God, via the word of their religion, right? So if the religion itself produces the ideology, meaning it grants these powers to individuals that come out of it, then yes, I'm going to judge the religion based on what the individuals do, right? Because the individuals are a direct representation of the ideology. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Kemeticism, whatever they call it, right? Any ideology, right? If you come to me in the garments of a simple, or in the garments of a culture, with the book of a culture, with the ideology of the culture, and I judge your actions, then yes, I am judging your religion, right? Because you're a representative of your religion, like you're a representative of your country, like you're a representative of your race, right? In a like a politically correct society, we've been told that we're not supposed to do that, but the reality is much different, bro. If you actually right? Yeah, yes, I'm judging a person as an individual, but I'm trying to explain to you, if you look at it from a societal point of view, and even from like a pseudo psychoanalysis point of view, something culturally has produced that person to think and act in that way. All right. And as I said to you earlier on, religion entails the codifying culture. Right? So something produces the individual, right? And the individual isn't coming from a vacuum. It's coming from a place in a society, in a country that has an ideology. And that ideology usually entails something religious in it. So I'm not making like special like acceptances for individuals. Right? I'm talking about, look, if your culture says martyrdom is cool, right, that gives you the opportunity to do X, Y, Z, then I'm judging what martyrdom as an ideology produces. If your ideology says imperialism is cool, that gives you the right to do X, Y, and Z, then I'm judging what that ideology produces, right, etc., etc. So don't get me wrong. I know people love that, like, oh yeah, religious people do terrible things. Nah, they're not really religious though, right? Yeah, you can say that, but if you go tell them they're not religious, what will they tell you, right? Like I said, you can't say you're more Christian than the Pope. You can't say you're more Muslim than the Ayatollah. You can't say you're more, I don't know, Jewish than Netanyahu or whatever, right? I don't know who that guy is, right? But you can't tell them that they're not acting on the behalf of their religion, because they absolutely are, right? They've interpreted their ideology, or they've read it in a certain way, and they're acting on it. They're acting on the moral laws and the attitudes found within the code itself. You're just having a different interpretation to them, but it doesn't mean they're not representing your religion like you are. So I know maybe not explain that very well, but yes, I'm absolutely judging a religion by what it produces, judge the fruits in it. DC, did you not listen to anything I said? Okay. Anyways, right, back to base. Religion has everything to do with culture and humans, right? Very little to do with supernatural entities. Preservation of culture at that. I'm saying humans invented God. All known concepts of God come from the minds of humans. So there's no doubt in my mind at this point. It's not just one person, though. This is what I'm saying to you, bro. It is not just one person. Right? You need to study the history of Christendom, for instance, right? It's not one person. It's literally their ideology, the way they think and act, doesn't just come from a vacuum. It's prescribed. It's passed down, right? So it's not just. We're getting into a weird space. Right? Yes, we're not, like in modern day time, we're not supposed to be persecutory, or politically incorrect. But the reality is the reality. There are some religions on earth right now that see it as the saved and the sinners, like the clean and the dirty, the righteous and the evil, meaning our abode is abode of peace, their abode is the abode of war, right? And that is what is sanctioned in their worldview, and that is what allows them to act the way they do, right? Whether they're in a secular pluralist society or a completely like conservative traditionalist fundamental society, the ideology produces the people. Yes, people produce the ideology, but very rarely are these people stepping out of their cultural indoctrination, and coming up with their own views. A lot of them are just following by the book what's passed down to them, right? And the religion is a big part of that. So yes, I am saying that. Like, from my point of view, when we're talking about the Abrahamics, we're talking about a Cerberus, bro. We're talking about a three-headed dog, right? A three-headed dragon. It's producing these people itself. Exactly, goat man. Exactly, right? Persecutory delusions come into it. Oh well, and tit for tat. They did this to us and our ancestors, so we're doing this to them. Like, this is righteous retribution. This is prophecy. This land is ours. That land. They're heathens. All this kind of shit is within the context of the religion itself, right? Of course, religion, as I keep saying, pertains to culture. So these pieces will be in there. But if you want to be more like honest with yourself, you would say, all right, as an individual, when he's saying Christianity, he's not necessarily talking to me, right? Because as an individual, I can operate from various different ethical systems. I can pull the best bits from Christianity. I can pull the best bits from Islam. I can pull the best bit from Judaism, right? So he's not necessarily talking directly to me, because I know I'm not blowing anyone to smithereens. I know I'm not, like sending people out to die. I know I'm not like poisoning the world. I know I'm not trying to economically assassinate a group of people. I know I'm not trying to ethnically cleanse. So obviously he's not talking to me. But if you're going to be fair, when he's saying this, right, can I find instances within my religious text or ideology which makes this okay? And can someone that's within my religious ideology take let's say you're a liberal Christian, can someone take a conservative view of Christianity and interpret it in a conservative way like you would interpret it in a liberal way? Then there you go, right? This is what's allowing for people to act the way they do, right? Like they're saying currently in the news, you can't use the idea of mutually assured destruction against a group of people whose ideology it like glorifies martyrdom. Mutually assured destruction isn't going to work on somebody that is happy to die. Okay, so the ideology entails them being willing to make certain sacrifices that maybe someone more sane wouldn't make. Now, that isn't a knock to a specific group of people, but it's an example of how this plays out. That's just one thing, right? That goes across the social and economic spectrum too, not just warfare. Right? Some will be willing to make certain types of concessions that others won't. Right? Some will be willing to infiltrate like economic and political systems for their own religious agendas. We seeing this play out in our real time, bro. So it's not just a simple, they're naughty Christians, they're naughty Muslims, they don't represent us. No, you don't get to say that. They to them, they are absolutely doing what's in the interest of their religion. To them. No, I don't. I'm just talking to talk, bro, while I drink my coffee. We are sidetracked talking about religion, but again, I'm not really explaining what I mean properly, so it could be conflated and just taken in different directions. The point of the conversation is that humans invented gods. Yes, religion is part of the conversation, but religion pertains to culture, right? Groups of people from specific places, keeping alive their traditions, their ideologies, right, their norms, etc. Your views about God are likely imparted to you through religion, but that doesn't mean they're the exclusive views on God or what God is, what's right or what's wrong, right? Ethical systems too. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, JG, right? If you're specifically talking about the Abrahamics, you're talking about the history of the Levant. So yes, there are older gods. There's the Mesopotamian and Sumerian gods, or they are Sumerian gods, really. You got your Inanna, your Ishtar, your Enlil. I think Anu later on with the Canaanites, or I can't remember which one. But yeah, from that same point of view, your religion only comes about due to that history existing. Tangaroa. Are you from the islands, bro? Yes, the Indus Valley is older too, that's true. But they have a different view on what gods are. They have henotheistic system. And actually, like, Hinduism is more philosophy than religion. Right? So it's different philosophies coming together. It's far more philosophy than, like, Abrahamic type of religion, ritual focused, text heavy kind of stuff. The Indus Valley and further east have always been way more thoughtful in their god or spiritual concepts than, like, the Middle East and Europe. They've always been more thoughtful. That's why they had so much advances in, like, maths and things like that. Okay, language and shit. No, it's more philosophical than about belief, bro. But it goes without saying that all of these systems have flaws. There's no perfect philosophy. There's no perfect religion. Everyone has their drawbacks and their bonuses or their pluses. But what I will say is this, yeah. I'm drinking a coffee. A henotheistic system, that is like, our culture has a god, that culture has a god. A polytheistic system, there's various gods. A pantheistic system, God is everything. An animistic system, God is spirits that inhabit nature. A deistic system, God is a non-intervening creator God, right? All of these God systems are way more harmonious and effective for, like, a good life, all right, or the good life, if you will, than monotheism. Monotheism, by its nature, is divisive because it says there is only one, and that one just happens to be the one that my culture introduces. Therefore, that one sanctions the best for my culture, my peoples. Hence why the past 2,000 odd years has been nothing but destruction based on the big three monotheistic gods, right? It's people saying we have the right because there's only one and that one belongs to us. It's I don't really see a practical way to change that at this point. And the best we can do is help them reform religions and become more progressive. For instance, like in the Islamic world, they're finally starting to see some real pushback from progressive Muslims, which is great. But it's not fast enough, right? In my opinion, right? But even within their system, there's your fundamentalists and your conservative Muslims that are giving the progressives and the more liberal Muslims a hell of a time, a hell of a fight. Because they don't want to let go of traditions. They don't want to let go of the old way of doing things. But that being said, Islam being one of the last from the Abrahamic traditions, unless you're counting like Mormonism and stuff, it is the most due for reforms out of all of them. Jews have had their reforms. They still need reforms. Christians have had their reforms. Islam had reforms like within the last 1,000 years or so. But all that did really was split into two parties. Right? But they've not reached the same level of reformation that Christianity and Judaism has had yet. And that is kind of happening in real time. But it's like what you'll see on just scrolling through TikTok. You'll see like one group of people protesting Islamic State in Iran. You see another group of people protesting for Islamic State in Iran. One group is more fundamental and the other is more liberal or more progressive, so to speak, right? Not necessarily all of them, because a lot of them who don't want Islam in Iran aren't even Islamic, but amongst them are more progressive Islamists, right? or Muslims, right? Sorry. But on the other end, you want people who advocate for more fundamental type of Sharia Islam, right? Which isn't not cohesive, but it wouldn't work in modern society. You can't live as someone 1,400 years ago in 2026 But people who hold that fundamentalist kind of view of Islam are the same people who want to infiltrate political systems, economical systems, and shift a whole country's backbone into something more viable for their view, right? But that's what I'm saying to you, right? Amongst the Muslims, there are more progressive people that say no, right? We take the teachings, we take our beliefs, but we function in a pluralistic society. So we're not going to turn England into, you know, an Arab country. But the fundamentalist Muslims are like, no, anywhere we go, we're turning it into an Islamic state. Right? That is the fight that's happening internally in Islam. The progressives aren't being allowed to exist in the capacity that they need to in order to bring about reform in Islam. Right? Christianity is still having that, but it's had so many splinter offs with like Protestant Reformation, the laws, etc. Right? Judaism with your Orthodox, and I forget what the other one's called. Right? Even Hebrew Israelites, right? Which is interesting enough. At this point in history, we're seeing other white people call out the Ashkenazi Jews for being fake Jews, which is interesting. But yeah, it's if you just take a zoomed out look at geopolitics, it is literally the same three people with the most power and control causing the most strife. It's literally the same three people. Now, the individuals that like fall under Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, it's not necessarily anything to do with them. Just like under Christendom, individual Christians suffered. Right? It's not necessarily their fault. But on a systematic level, right, or on an institutional level, even Muslims will suffer under Islamic State. Right? You know, even Jews will suffer under Zionism. Even Christians will suffer under Christendom, okay? Because it's about taking the most fundamental and extreme ideas of the ideology and making the world bend to it, rather than being harmonious with the world as it is. Hence why monotheism is so disruptive everywhere it goes, okay? That's not true, Mercy. There's plenty of evidence of us producing goods. But anyways, I stayed way longer than I was supposed to because I wanted to finish my coffee. Yeah, the laws of physics have little to do with your God concept, bro. There is no God concept that did not come from the minds of humans, and there's never been evidence of a God existing as an independent entity capable of having any meaningful effect on our physical reality. No. God is an abstract concept. Maths, logic, physics, also abstract concepts, but they are in a different category of abstract concepts. Whether the formal processes of maths, physics, or logic are understood, you will get the same answers universally. God is not like maths, logic, or physics. It has never existed universally. It is completely mind dependent, and it depends on who is interacting with the concept, what their view will be of it. So God is in the category of fictional characters, while maths, logic, and physics are in the category of formal processes. Okay, or formal language. So yeah, like, don't conflate the two. Your God concept does not function in any meaningful way like that. It's just a straw man you use to explain things with, like someone said, like a cloth that you put over reality to give it shape, but it itself doesn't have any useful function. So I'm gonna have a couple more sips, then I'm gone. Yeah, change entails time though, doesn't it, right? Change is something temporal. Nah, I don't do this daily, bro. Oh, sorry, bro. The YouTube is at SetWest. Sorry, the TikTok is at SetWest10. I don't really know the link stuff on how to do it. That's the username. The YouTube is at Culture Crack, so you can jump between two if you want. Belief is something aside. Like, look, a form of belief and faith is necessary for reasoning, right? For making use of your cognitive faculties. But when you start conflating like reasoning faith and reasoning belief with religious faith and belief, you're making a giant mistake, right? Things can be known right? You can also believe in things that are known, but they're not the same, right? In religious belief, it's to accept without proof. So I don't just interact with things that are factual only, right? Because in as a point of fact, facts themselves can be updated with new information. I know it's kind of contradictory in a way, but don't take the. I don't know how to explain it to you, right? I'm the type of person that will grant material things exist, and there are also immaterial things, e.g., like we just talked about, logic, maths, physics, right? They're like linguistic descriptions of things. Okay. But anyways, it's time to go. Appreciate you all for tuning in. I'll leave you with this. All known gods are psychological constructs and do not exist independently of the mind. If your god requires belief, imagination or faith to interact with, it's functionally non-existent. It's likely someone has to devise a concept of God and impart it to you for you to interact with, or you yourself have to devise a concept of God in order to interact with it. In the history of the world, if you had to explain this to a child, no one has ever gone out onto their native land and discovered the God of another land. And there has never, ever, at any time in history, been one universal understanding of what a God is. So I'll leave the rest to you to conclude.